Hello, our dear viewers. Welcome to the Youth Roundtable here, where we discuss issues pertinent to the youth of this country, of Uganda, but also the youth of East Africa and Africa and world over. Today, we bring into discussion a pertinent matter, which is the issue of security. We know that the security question is something that is a permanent issue. We have to continue dealing with it depending on what arises. And of course, as the drums were cooling down from the celebrations of independence, we did have a rather surprise incident that happened at Queen Elizabeth National Park last week, where we saw the rebels, allegedly ADF, or as per the official army position of Uganda, the ADF, which stands for Allied Democratic Forces, attacking two tourists, but also, importantly, a tour guide, and killing them. This caused a lot of shock within the country, which is a situation that we might not be used to. Today, we are here to discuss that incident, but also why the need to cross-cutting issues of democracy, regional integration, now that we have DRC integrating with Uganda. Recently, we saw the lifting of visa restrictions between the two countries, among other developments. But we shall also be discussing it from the general youth perspective. How can the youth be able to participate in peace processes, the presidential statements, among other items? But before we go into this discussion, I would like to introduce my very capable panel for the day, who will be breaking down the subject matter. And starting with the gentleman on my immediate left, Mr. Lawel Muhwezi, you're most welcome.
Thank you so much. I am glad to be back. They're always interesting conversations. I am looking forward to another one.
Thank you. And of course, Lawel is the founder of Tuzungumzie Africa. Hopefully, he will be able to tell you what that is as the show goes along. We also have Mr. or should I say Comrade Joshua Katabarwa, who is a political analyst. You're most welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Okot and my fellow panelists. It's always a pleasure coming to discuss here with you. Nice to meet you again.
Nice to see you again. And of course, my good friend, Awino Abeno, comrade. Awino Abeno is a lawyer, and for today she'll also be a security analyst. You're most welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. People are saying, oh, glad to be back again. This is my debut. So I'm glad to be hosted. Thank you.
Yes, it doesn't look like your debut. Yeah. And of course, finally, we have Nshuti Princess, who is the East African Youth Ambassador. Oh, I should have started with Her Excellence. Yeah, Youth Ambassador of the East African community to Uganda. You're most welcome.
Thank you for having me. Yeah. I'm glad to be here.
All right, and starting with you, just an icebreaker. I know the topic is a bit sensitive, but picking up from the last 1 week, maybe in a couple of minutes, what was your take from the current affairs happening within the country?
So one of my takes from the events that have been going on over the past week is, first of all, except from the perspective of being a nation, but I think from the entire region as East Africa, I think we are all experiencing a bit of insecurity, starting with us, but then it could end up spreading to the rest of the countries. We've seen with Rwanda similar issues, and mostly also with Congo, and it being a new country into the region, it has us wondering how are we going to integrate properly if we still have these kind of problems. And these are problems that are affecting the people at the local level, at the lowest level possible. Even the people that are making the biggest decisions may not have the actual feel of what's happening on ground. So the past week has had me thinking, how then can we as youth work towards promoting peace and security through the region, starting from the lowest level? Because I believe participation in processes of development is key to addressing issues like these.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And of course, I remember we celebrated, our president celebrated that now the East African community runs from the Indian Ocean to the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah.
But we all know there's that belt of Eastern Congo where there's polarization, and we will be delving into that discussion. We are glad we have you from the headquarters itself. Yeah. Yes. Miss Awino, what was your take from the last 1 week?
I think for me, really, in terms of regional integration, the fact that Uganda and DRC have now had a consensus in regards to mobility of citizens, that there now no longer are visa restrictions. So what that means is that citizens can, the flow of citizens from one country to another is now easier. Whereas that obviously feeds into the regional objective of having a common market protocol and the customs union and how it generally fosters trade, it also has implications in our security processes.
True.
Right? And the question that we would obviously now ask ourselves is, will it worsen the security situation, or will the regional framework be more strengthened to then mitigate the security concerns that are there now? And I am hoping that at the EAC secretariat level, but also in terms of individual country governance processes, these things should be addressed, and there have to be policies in place that will actually help the issue. I strongly believe that security is a governance issue.
Yes.
And our policies, our legal framework, but also implementation of the policies that exist then need to be given more attention such that the situation is under control.
All right, thank you very much. And of course, that also brings into light the issue around porous borders. I think Uganda has over 600 porous border points, and it was highlighted in the analysis of what happened last week with the crossing of rebels. Of course, these rebels are citizens, so their mobility might also be increased.
Yeah.
But I think overall, the discussion is this a net good? And that will be put to the table for discussion as we move along. Joshua, your take from the last 1 week?
All right. Once again, I'm glad to be here and meeting great ladies over here. But you know, this gentleman here is yet a colleague and a comrade. But you know, Francis Mbuga says in his book, The Betrayal in the City, that when the madness of the whole nation disturbs the solitary mind, it is not enough to say that the man is mad. Now, having all these issues in the nation and the region and on the globe, I would want to start on a light note and join the Parliament of Uganda and join the whole nation to congratulate our speaker and her dear husband. We got the news that they are now Nalongo and Salongo. So really, that is a good thing to start with. Congratulate them, and we wish the babies a healthy life ahead. Then again, what has been moving over the week, I think was it yesterday, the original founders of FDC finally decided to sit and have a chat to see how FDC can be saved. But unfortunately, in my view, I think we still have a long way to go with the current political situation of opposition politicians in the nation, and the involvement of the new generation in this. So my take is, I think if we are to have a good nation politically, we need, as young people, to study what is happening. Yeah, we don't need to be like the French Bourbons who learned nothing and forgot nothing. So we need to have a clear view of what is happening, what has been happening, and what is yet to happen, such that before we say that the youths are the leaders of tomorrow, we should know what is happening today.
Yes.
Yeah, I saw the conversation, I saw the statements from the Colonel himself, retired Chiza Besigye, about FDC, and then now there is the Najanankumi faction saying, okay, if you're saying that we are meeting as the founders, and then you're bringing the current interim president of Katonga faction as one of the founders, yet he's been in the party for the last 2 years. So what confusion does this bring? And as we near the 2026 elections and we are seeing this, how ready is then the country? Then now you have this disorganization and you have the threats this side.
Yes.
How do you manage the two?
What threats?
You have the disorganization in politics here.
Yes.
And then you have people being killed and being burnt in broad daylight.
Yeah.
And the next thing we are told, you see, this is ADF. After being driven away miles into the Congo, we see the attacks come back. So how then are we ready as the nation? My sister says the security is purely a governance issue. So how ready are we as the nation? How ready is our government to make sure that we do not get entangled into because I don't want us to believe that the enemy is using the chance of the disorganization we are having, where everyone is looking at who is not ready, and then they strike. And of course, with the impact it has on our tourism, I'm talking about the bad incident in Kasese, feeling so sorry and mourning with grieved families and the nation. So I would want us as a nation to put our priorities straight and don't get caught off guard.
All right. We will get into that discussion. Of course, congratulations to the Right Honorable Speaker for that feat. I believe that's one of the strongest titles you can have in this country, of Salongo or Nalongo. Coupled with the Right Honorable Speaker makes her extremely powerful.
Yeah, true.
Socio-politically. Yeah. And of course, seasoned member of this panel, Lawel. What was your take from the last 1 week?
I think for me, just taking it from where he stopped, I think much of what we have, especially in terms of the general discourse, is clear lack of civic competence and abrogation of civic duties, especially by the leaders. So, because when you look at the quality of discussion at Parliament, I think for the last 3 weeks, from the issue of the female MP, to birth of the Speaker giving birth, you realize that the discourse we are having is really not.
There's also that bickering between Puga and
exactly,
Puga and the Prime Minister.
So I think as much as all of us can dismiss it and say, wow, those are the MPs we have, but you see the alternative is that Ugandans are not benefiting from the people they elected. And so we all get lost in the bickering and non-productive conversations. And yet these individuals have a responsibility to, deliver legislation or supervision of government programs for the citizens, but also it has an effect on the general intellectual discussion, especially on forums like Twitter, like television shows. You realize even the public intellectuals get drawn into discussing non-productive things.
Yes.
Maybe the other issue I'll talk about is the general the Israel-Palestine conflict, because it now has it's what is being talked about, and it also has a ripple effect, I think, on terrorism.
True.
Yeah, for some time there have been links between ADF and ISIS and all these other powerful. So if you have conversations around Hamas, Hezbollah, and other entities who are said to be funding terrorism, you also want to pay attention. We hope the situation can de-escalate, can be contained, and at the end of the day we have sort of peaceful settlement. That's what I can say for now.
All right. Yeah. Thank you very much. And of course, as a world over, there's an outcry for humanitarian corridors and support to be set up for the people of Gaza. And we hope that is something that can be realized. But also back to the key topic of today, and I'll start with you, Lawel, before we proceed to the other panelists. We had an attack last week where two tourists, I believe, on a honeymoon, a Briton and a South African, were attacked together with the tour guide, and they were burnt in broad daylight, as my brother Joshua said, which was a shocking image. We are not used, maybe that's a good thing, to such images. But how did our government miss this?
So I think that, unlike very many, I don't know if I call them government critics, I think even when you are secure, you can always have bleachers, especially if you have an existential threat like ADF and other groups in Congo. I remember, I think prior to that incident, there had been a communication that UPDF had decimated some concentration areas of the ADF, and that some were moving, had entered Uganda, and people needed to be on alert. And so consequently, you have that attack. I don't think that necessarily Uganda is not doing what it should do. I think it's doing it. However, there's always going to be those bleachers here and there. The question is, how best do we respond? I think what most of us really are not trusting of government is for the spokesperson to immediately say that ADF is what has committed without some sort of due diligence.
Because normally terrorists also come up and own the attack.
And there's the idea that ISIS was claiming the attack in the national park, but also is that we need to be sure you know what you're doing as security, even if you have been bleached. Saying it's possible, it happens, but we need to be sure that you're doing all that is necessary to deal with the challenge, and that you're investigating to understand what is indeed the cause of the insecurity or of the incident. But if a spokesperson there's an attack, and then the first communication is that it is ADF, all of us, even when you're not security experts, we expect that you leave all options open. It could have been any new entity. It could have been a dispute within the national park due to unhealthy competition. You leave your options open so that with time, when you come up with a conclusion, even if the other people don't claim the attack, you have the right response, as opposed to first saying it's ADF, and then it looks as though you're looking for easy answers to the population. But I hope that the situation can be managed. Of course, it has a very big effect on the tourism, because there's talk of how many trips have been cancelled because everyone cares about their security. What is my opinion about Congo being part of the East African community? I think it is okay. I think it makes it easy for us to engage. It gives us legitimacy to intervene, and because whether they are part of us or not, we have a common challenge. The question is, under what arrangement do we easily agree on how to deal with it? And I think that being part of ESC facilitates such processes.
All right. We shall delve into that, of course, as part of our wider discussion. But I wanted to come to you, Joshua. We have this, should I say, Kasese region question that has been there. It's a security question. We had children murdered a few months ago, shot dead in a class. The Queen Elizabeth Park is not far off from there, but also several ADF attacks over the years. How do we address this Kasese or Rwenzori region question as a country that has almost become a recurring issue for our Ugandan security context?
Yeah, thank you, Comrade Okot, I think even before we look at Kasese or Rwenzori region, we need to look at the whole nation, because this threat is not Kasese based.
Yes.
Much as Kasese is the immediate area affected, but we've seen these happenings outside the western region. We've seen, you know, for the last 19 years, for all the 19 years, the north was in display, and now it seems to have shifted to the extreme west. So when we, like my colleague says, when we get such attacks, question is, how are we able to respond? It's not even 5 months when the same manner of terrorism happened in the same district, and then we realize that there seems to be a shift of the mode of attack. Before, we had assassinations all over the nation.
Yes.
Before you know it, so and so has been assassinated. Before you know it, so and so has been assassinated. And before you know it, there is a bomb being detonated somewhere. And now we are seeing someone coming, killing, setting on fire. What are they burning? Are they trying to tell could we say that before we would get near answers of, we can say, okay, this is the gun that was used, this is a bullet shell, but now let us burn everything so that we would not get to know who it is. And does that answer the question of, okay, now that the whole vehicle has been burnt, let us push the blame. Say it is so and so. Or we need to know why the mode is again changing and taking a different course. And then
do you think they were probably trying to pass a message?
I want to believe so. Ideally, when, okay, as of now, the blame is pushed to the government. I mean to ADF. Yesterday I saw the spokesperson of police saying they will release a detailed report after they have gotten the forensics between the three countries, that is Uganda, South Africa, and the UK. When they get that final report, they will release. So I want to believe that it is a message, but now the question remains, to who exactly? We do not see the ADF as a political threat, that it's a rebel group fighting to take over power. We haven't seen that clearly. We haven't seen it fight in a sense of it's an economic fight, of let us destabilize this region and have ABCD out. We haven't seen that. Could it be revenge? Could it be a new strategy of, you have our leader, we must get him back? Could it be a strategy of, because we remember recently, I think ADF was aligning with ISIS. Could it be that now it is a new power coming in that we do not know? We need to look at all these. Now, after looking at all this, then it brings me back to the question, how do we then manage it? I think it is high time, like my sister was saying here, it is high time we as a nation and the government re-energized and re-strategized the LC system. It is true we have it in the nation, but how effective is it? You remember when they first burnt the students?
So the LC system is supposed to have the capacity to locally deal with some of these uncoordinated.
You see, with the LC system, with the working LC system,
yes,
everyone should be able to account for anyone and everyone around them. Now, I wanted to first bring in this, when they burnt the students, the reports came and they were said, actually, these people have been seen around for a time. Now, if such a report comes to a well-intelligence system we have as a nation, now it brings us the question of then, do we have the working LC system? Now, I would be of the view that we need to re-strategize and energize and capacitate the LC systems such that we have intelligence from the grassroots. These, like you said, the rebels are also citizens, they are natives. So if we have a working LC system that can tell, I saw Okot in Mbarara, but we do not know any relative of Okot in Mbarara. We do not know any business Okot does in Mbarara. We haven't had any friend of him. We haven't even had any person speaking the same language as him. So what is he doing in Mbarara? From there we can start.
And that's an interesting point, because the government has actually gone out to tell people that the president's directive on Twitter or on X was that people need to actually, the police authorities need to involve the wananchi. But perhaps what he forgets is that the institution of local government or local council, which was supposed to deal with that, has largely deteriorated.
Okay, talking of police no muntu wa wansi, kudos to retired Afande Kasinje, the mind behind this. You bring such a good system, you put it in place. Then after, you militarize the police and make us apart. How do you expect us to? That is number one.
So there's a question of civilian
the civilian police relationship is a very big question. Then another thing, the HE gives a directive of let us start from the wananchi. But now you forget that the LC system, the birth of democracy, the birth of leadership, the birth of governance in any society in Uganda is not working. I'll give you an example. I was born and I found a NLC chairperson at home that could not take himself to the trading centers. I have lived to know him as the chairperson. Does that person still have the capacity to monitor the village? If we can have general elections every after 5 years, well budgeted for, funded and practiced, why is it that there is a section that is put out? Why? Okay, if we're going for the 2026 general elections, we have the president, we have the members of parliament, we have the LC5 chairpersons, we have all these mayors. Why can't we do the same? And we say, if we have finished the general elections, we are going to into council elections, we have the chairpersons, LC1, LC2, LC, all go through. Then we know that we have people that we can hold accountable. If I went to my village and my goat is missing, then I should be able to ask the chairperson, LC1, what's wrong?
Thank you for that, Comrade Joshua. And I think one of the classic cases the president keeps repeating about the use of communities insecurities, how they managed to defeat Lakwena in Busoga by telling people not to give them food. After having failed, this woman was serious. Which brings me to you, Mercy. We have different classifications. I think there's also a definition question here. We have different classifications of some of these rebel groups. The ADF started as an Islamic pressure group, stemming from some issues within the administration. I hope the current Protestant problem doesn't form that. But stemming from something similar, a disagreement on the leadership of the Muslims. But we all know that the tenets of a legitimate war is legitimate cause and legitimate methods. Do you think the ADF has ceased to be, for example, in a legitimate force with any cause? Of course, the methods are wrong, and it's now just a criminal group trying to benefit from these pockets of insecurity?
I think that I would think that what any group does should then define them.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
That even if you are an Islamist pressure group, are your activities being done in a legitimate manner? Because I can understand if you're a pressure group, but you have legitimate means of engaging government, of engaging the systems that are in place in order to achieve a certain purpose that you actually want. But when you start delving into illegitimate activities, things that are not acceptable in any democratic society, then you cease to become a legitimate establishment, and then you deteriorate into a criminal group. So I can't say that the government was right in saying that the attack was ADF, because again, like it's as Lawel was saying, there was very little time to actually have come up with a conclusive conclusive report on that it was the ADF, and which then, as he said, is government just looking for a scapegoat? We cannot also be conclusive about that. But then on what Comrade Joshua was talking about, you see the nexus between the Wananchi, especially in regards to cooperating with security personnel in coming up with an alert system generally to mitigate most of these security things. As I said, governance issue. What has the government done to incentivize the citizens to watch out for it? Because when in the social contract theory, the citizens give their power to the government so that the government can do things, can provide basic services, social services, and public service to the citizens.
True.
Now, when we look at the relationship between our government and the citizens, can we say that the government has held its part of the bargain? I mean, political experts have said no. There are so many loopholes in the service delivery that is in place. And so sometimes you will find the citizens who are ideally supposed to be now working for the government and working together with government have decided to also sit and say, you know what, that is not our issue, let the government work on it. But apart from that, what then it puts the citizens to a state of desperation that the living situation of citizens then force the citizens to also now behave like terrorist groups. And obviously in that manner, we can't call the citizens a terrorist group because it's an act of desperation. It is a response to the governance structure that is already in place.
True.
So when, for example, when you obviously draw from history, you look at the French Revolution, for example, and how the lower class then, the bourgeoisie, and everyone decided to rise up against the Bourbon monarchy. And then you look into our situation. Maybe you could say that Ugandans have not yet been pushed to that point of madness to have an overhaul of the system. But you can see that we are taking strides there. You know, if people do not have food. I was reading an article and someone was giving a commentary on why the ADF has particularly chosen the Kasese region, that area, to, have its operations. And one of the opinions there was the fact that the place is of a rural nature. And it's easier to deal in rural communities because people are already dissatisfied with the governance system. They're not getting the things that they want from government. So it becomes very easy for them to be seduced by and be recruited even by other people that might, even if they're not offering a better alternative, people will just be swayed by anything, right? So, but then if government was paying attention to every region in the country and actually doing its job, delivering services, developing the economic systems of every particular part, then it might be harder for these rebel groups to infiltrate and to actually thrive in those communities. But then again, when he speaks about the LC structures, again, that's still a governance thing, right? And yes, we could say, we have RDCs, we have DSOs, GISOs, and all those structures. But then again, how have these institutions been empowered to actually do the work that they're supposed to do? Are they just there as spy mechanisms for the government, or are they there to respond to security threats? Those are the questions that we should be asking ourselves. And I do know that, as Lawel was trying to say, that you see, ever since the attack that happened, there was Operation Shuja. It was there to respond to most of these ADF attacks. So then the question is, in, for example, the situation of the Queen Elizabeth Park, how is it that in a game park where you have game rangers, you actually have police and all that, how is it that there was not even one single alert that, you know, the ADF was happening and to mitigate that? That's a question. Could it have been done by the citizens themselves? What pushed the citizens to actually start, you know, attacking tourists and even killing one of their own fellows? Those are questions that, you know, people in government, people who make security decisions need to ask themselves and come up with strategies, instead of having people in parliament, you know, just abusing each other and trying to minimize each other's authority. These are the pertinent things that they should be discussing. And as youth, we need to hold our parliamentarians accountable. And right from the LCs, as he said, we need to be able to hold the LC chairperson accountable, hold the LC5 chairperson accountable, in turn, hold the RDCs accountable at every single stage.
Yes.
There has to be an accountability mechanism where the citizens know that we need to hold these people in power, because if we do not hold them accountable, then they probably won't even be doing their job. And for as long as we sit back and not exercise our duties as citizens, then we are only accomplices to the maladministration that is happening.
All right, thank you very much. And of course, we will continue with that discussion, especially around how our democracy spills down to some of the small issues that we have. But before we finish that round, I would also like to bring you in, Nshuti. They have been discussing, especially attributing some of these issues to governance. What more is missing? What more can be done to secure this Rwenzori region, which it has now become almost normalized that every once in a while there is some form of attack, terrorists or otherwise, but it's become a largely polarized, insecure region?
So first of all, I'd like to think that as we do things over time, you kind of get the niche of it. So I'd say over time, there's been a number of these cases that have been identified by the army to be by ADF. ADF did this, ADF did that. So I would think that if it's been happening continuously, then the army and our government would come up with a strategic solution to solve this. But then if we are still getting recurring problems over the same thing constantly, like she said, governance has to be the issue. Like there's a problem within our institutions. And I would want to say that this problem is probably around monitoring and evaluation. Who is being held accountable? Who do we look at to, who is supposed to be responsible for this? Who should we be asking these questions? What's your role? What's the role of the local government if it's not going to be involved in this? If they're going to have to call on to the president to come and solve this issue? I don't think the president has to cross over to DRC to have to deal with an ADF issue. It's a local problem. It's a problem that's within a region that has constantly had the same problem. So I feel like we should have had a strategic solution. The army should have, because it's been very many years and it's been the same thing happening, similar things happening. So yeah, I would say monitoring and evaluation. Someone should be held accountable. And again, participation. People should know what their rights are and what they're supposed to do in response to this. And they should, so in the spirit of participation, they should be taught peace resolutions, conflict resolutions. The local people, I don't think most of them understand how they could resolve this problem. They believe the government should be responsible for this. Us as people, we have nothing we can do about it. We are just people. But then if the government involved them in the processes of resolving these conflicts, I think by the time, hopefully not, by the time any other attack would be happening, they would be ready to solve this. They would have a strategic way to solve this without having to make it a bigger problem or to become a national issue. Yet it could be resolved at the local level. So yeah, the government should involve people, participate, teach them how to resolve these conflicts, help them understand what role they can play. Which is where I think I would bring up the the issue of civic education.
True.
Most of us don't really know which institution does this, we don't know who is supposed to be held accountable for most of the things. We only know what they tell us. So if no one tells us that the army should be responsible for this, the local government should be responsible for this problem, then we shall never know. So we shall never even be able to
Do
come
you
up
think
with
that's an issue,
solutions
a
for that.
curricular issue?
Yes, it is first of all, I think we used to have political education a number of years ago. It was scrapped off. I think that's where people would have been like students, especially now that we know that people who are recruited into the rebel groups are usually 14-year-olds going to 18. Those are people that are in school. If they had the chance to know their civic rights, to have civic education, peace resolution, all those topics, all those issues, I think they would have been better off to solve these problems themselves before they would make it a bigger problem.
All right. Thank you very much. Back to you, Lawel. There was a discussion we had some time back at Conrad Adeno Stiftung, and the discussion for the day was the failures of the RDCs in Uganda, and people rose up and spoke about how they were, perpetuating some type of politics, holding opposition and frustrating democracy. Then I remember fondly the last speaker standing up and saying, no, you people, what you're calling the failures of the RDCs is actually their success.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
do you think that is the problem? Does the government still reward civil servants, ESO, DISO, like she said, LCs, for performing what they're supposed to do? Or is it now just, as long as you broker some votes, you're competent?
Okay, so I think away from the larger insecurity that is caused by terrorism, I think you can draw down the definition of security or insecurity to an individual. Is as an individual citizen, do you feel secure? Do you feel peaceful? And once we break down the definition, then that's when you realize that you are not, because you may not be at the risk of ADF, but where you are in wherever you stay, you may not feel secure because the people who are responsible within that vicinity are not doing their job. So like you said, that person I think was right. Before you mark an RDC, you also need to first understand their terms of reference. Were they deployed to secure you, or to maybe extend and secure the political interests of whoever appointed them? I think we have failed generally. When you look at abductions, for example, I interact with many youth who are very opinionated, but they will never give their opinion publicly because they don't feel secure. They think anytime they are going to be picked up by drones, by government.
Disqualifies them as opinionated.
Well, I think to the extent that it's not a public forum like this one where they can be picked up. So I think when you break it down, and like I said about governance, is people don't feel secure to even enjoy the rights that she's talking about, to freely express and associate. So if we're talking about governance, so you have a government. I have a feeling, though, that the ADF question would be a political one. There may be some political undercurrents or threats to the government that government does not want to engage as political. Because apart from the Kasese region, you've had targets on public figures, Katumba, you've had these guys who have been shot down. You had it's my access. There's that social influencer who was shot down. So it is true that there are targets on public figures, and I'm sure the government actually does investigation, but does not want to openly have that discussion because then it brings a new political discussion, which I think they're not comfortable with. But just leave it there. But I think the general problem is government not respecting people's freedoms, which then has an effect on security. And that even if we are to train the communities to be alive to who is their neighbor, who is the new person in their vicinity. It's very difficult because the people who, for example, pick up these young people who are opposed to government are people who are in plain clothes. And so how are you going to be sure that this is a terrorist, or how are you going to be sure that this is a government operative? And so what we have is some sort of a dysfunctional state, which I think cannot, goes beyond even the whole discussion of governance. It's that you have a government which does not really care about being corrected or advised on its responsibility towards citizens. Because if you were saying we have a social contract, we give you our mandate, our taxes, in return you're supposed to provide these things, and then you have the same government abducting, incarcerating, torturing citizens, then you in effect you don't have a social contract. If you want to break it down to contracts,
what I find, and maybe you can guide me. In the past, when government would take people, it was called arrest. But more and more, the word abduction is gaining hegemony. What's is it the nature of arrest, the interest behind the arrest?
Unless you just want us to speak English, but we all know what happens. We all know that there are laws which outline how someone who is charged is supposed to be arrested and all that. We know that is not happening. We know how people are taken. We know how people are lying before court martial and the baseless cases and evidence that
why I ask that is because it could also be probably speaking to the legitimacy of government among the public when they use words like abduct instead of arrest.
Yeah, it's abduction. I don't know, because it's very hard for you to say people are kidnapped, because a kidnapper usually is not someone within the legal with mandate to arrest. It's some rascal out there. But you have government abducting its own citizens. I think that's the highest level of insecurity. And for me, if it's about social contract, I think they have already broken their part and they don't seem to care. I think that maybe like Mercy has said, we may not have reached that level where all of us are going to revolt against government. But once people don't have a way out, if the system that's supposed to protect them is oppressing them, then you're going to have these tendencies of desperation. And especially why Kasese is a fertile ground, the Obusinga, the Ila Republic sentiments. So it creates a fertile ground for anyone recruiting people into ADF. It's easy because government doesn't have favor. People don't like government and the military infrastructure. So it's hard for them to even cooperate. And the people are saying, why is all this happening when the Musinga had just been released to go back and there are events? And I think so the terrorists take advantage of the sentiments as well. So we are in a very tricky situation.
Yes, thank you very much. And what I picked from this round of questions is it's not just a military solution. I would like to commend government for, of course, trying its best at a security level with Operation Shuja and some of the operations that we have seen detonations in town. But from what I pick, it's more than just military. There has to be a socio-political element that has to run through the nation. And I think that discussion will go on and on. But I would like to switch to the message now. This has happened. How does the government, how best, if you were, let's say, the head of Uganda Media Center, or some people say the Minister of Truth, what's the message that the government should be passing out to the citizens following this attack? Comrade Joshua.
Yeah, thank you. Now you see the problem is when you're in a sorry state, you do not want to hear what you need to hear. You need to hear what you want to hear. Now, when something like that happens, then I think as a nation we are doomed. When you look at the tourism report as per yesterday, it says from the time the event happened up to date, up to yesterday, they hadn't registered any declines or any cancellations in the tourism sector. And as we very well know that tourism contributes a very big percentage. As an independent contributor, it contributes about 8% to the national economy. Now, I think what we need to hear is, okay, before we even get to the message, is I want to believe that we haven't received that downfall because the incident happens today and you do not expect to have the effect tomorrow. I want to believe that if we need to pray that the effects in the next 1 or 2, 3 months do not hit us really hard. Shortly after COVID, then after all these things happening, and then you have this now that is involving foreigners, and someone feels not so secure to board a plane, fly 18 hours to come and die in Uganda. Now, I think we need to really, and I want to commend the government, I want to commend the security forces. Yes, much as we are saying there is this disgruntlement between citizens and then the enemy is taking advantage of it, I want to commend that there is, not everything is lost, not every hope is, something is really being done. If you look at the reports of Operation Shuja, a lot of success has been registered.
I think there's no debate about that. The issue was what the wider problem, because there's the military problem which you have to handle militarily.
Yes.
But then there's also the socio-political problem.
Now, when it comes to the socio-political problem, I think, like we all said, yes, us the citizens need to be involved. And how do we get involved? We need to be we need to feel that we actually own something. If I have to protect, if I have something to protect, if I have something to call my own, then I have every right to protect it. But like he says, if I have to wake up in the morning and I talk about something oppressing me, and I'm not so sure if I'm going to say hello to the person I left in the house, then sometimes we feel, okay, why am I even struggling? After all, if a tragedy like that happened and then the government loses credibility, I could be at a chance of taking up something. So we tend to lose that trust, and we lose and it loses the support from us. But what message do we need now? I think looking at the tourism effect of it, looking at the economic effect of it, I think what we need to hear from the government now is the actual cause. We need to know who is targeting us, and we need to know how safe then are we. Yes, thanks to the security agencies, they have deployed almost everywhere in the national parks, and then they are saying all the parks are safe, but the deployments have been there before. Now, if the new developments have come, we need to get to know, like my sister was saying, we need to know who to ask. We need to know who to talk to. It's not just about seeing an armored vehicle parked somewhere. No, we need to know if there is a deployment somewhere. Who is the commander? How do I get to the commander? If I have information, how do I pass it on? Because when you look at a national park, it is not just somewhere you're just going to enter and walk freely. Now, if I have a suspicion on something, how do I get then to talk to the DSOs, the GSOs, the RDCs, the commanders we are talking about? Now, we need to have that information given to us as citizens. We need to have the assurance that, okay, that one happened. You know, they say absence of war doesn't necessarily mean peace.
True.
Now, that happened. And we cannot say that we can entirely eliminate it. Even bigger economies have had those threats, and it's been absurd. But now that it has happened, that we know that it is, the possibility of it happening is actually real. We have seen it happen. How then secure are we? Is what we need to get from the government. Is what we need to get from the security operatives, is what we need to get from the bigger community, the East African community, because if we are saying we are integrating Congo into the East African community, but now Ugandans are unsecure because of Congo, then okay, now if it becomes part of me, if I have had problems without it, And now the problem is within the home itself. So how safe are we? Now, what I think, like the question you put, if you are the minister of truth, I think you really need to speak the truth. You don't need to tell people what they want to hear. You need to tell the people, the nation, what it needs to hear. You need to tell the nation it is true we have threats. Stop giving us false hopes. Tell us we have threats. Please watch out. So, yeah, I shouldn't go to bed and I know everything is okay. And before I know it, my iron sheet is going away and blades are... Yet, if you told me the naked truth, here is the truth, the nation is under attack, please let us all be alert. Then that would give me a sense of responsibility. Like he was saying, that would give me a sense of responsibility if I saw something. But if you tell me, no, don't worry, the situation is under control. Yeah. Then I will.
Thank you. Before we go for the break, Mercy, just to build on his point, the government has made statements. One of them is the people should work with the government to be able to deal with the matter. But also, it has made a statement on who it thinks it is. And I believe the exact quote was, of course, it's the ADF we know. Those are the words of Felix Kulaije. But how do we mobilize a citizenry? When even announcements are made that there could be attacks in Kampala, people still party day in, day out. How do we get such a citizenry to be behind, an alert system for government? But also, I want you to speak from the regional integrational perspective. He brought it up. How do we then how do we take this message to Ugandans that, yes, we still need Congo, even when there are these threats coming in? As we go for the break,
Yeah, so just picking up from the conversation that started from Lawel, that you see, in order for the citizens to believe you, they need to trust you. That's the most basic. We need to trust. And the question is, how do we get the citizens to trust the government? How does the government endear itself to the citizenry? And again, for me, as a governance enthusiast, as a person a practitioner of democratic principles, I believe, one, that everything is political. When you look at military decisions, economic decisions, everything has a political aspect. Why? Because everything needs to be done politically, right? Even the things that we think, like just eating food, it's a very political decision. Because if the government decides to not construct roads and whatnot, then and they cut off Sekisoro, for example, will not be having like things like Irish in, that's like just a very basic thing. So everything is very political. And what is politics? What is governance? What is democracy? You get, those are the very basic things that we need to understand, things that we need to teach the citizenry. As she said, we need to do civic education, that there's duties that the government has, the duties that citizens have, because it's also not fair for us to think that the government should do for us everything. No. As citizens, there are duties that we must execute. And our execution of these duties will supplement the mandate that government has to also execute on our behalf, right? So going back, because Lawel talked about the fact that you see there is actually no contract between the citizens. There is no social contract. Why? Because government has decided not to do anything. He was saying something about the fact that the government does not want to be held accountable, does not want to be corrected and all. So our political leadership needs to go back to the drawing board and allow themselves to be corrected, allow themselves to actually interact on a basic level with the citizenry. Go back to our constitution is one of the very best, before it was bastardized, one of the very best legal instruments in the continent. If we just went back to actually following what the constitution provides, that's enough to set us on a journey of democracy and a journey of good governance. So then coming back to the fact that when we now trust the government, then we can respond to government directives in an efficient manner. If they say that, you see, at the stage where they're doing Civic Space TV today, if there is a bomb there, then we can go. We would not just be here saying that, those guys always speak, and that's it, and then we continue recording the show. That's it. So as long as we trust, as long as there are systems in place for accountability, like he said, then it's easy for citizens to then respond to alerts, to hold government accountable, to contribute civically to the government processes. Then in the wider concept of integration, I think personally that the integration is a wonderful concept. And when you look at the stages, we are now heading towards the political confederation, which becomes then a stepping stone for us to have the political federation. But at the stage of confederation, obviously we have individual states still managing their home affairs, right? But with a system of cooperation. So our diplomatic and international relations within that regional bloc is very strong. The joining of DRC into the existing community is obviously there's a lot we can gain from the DRC. We all know it's a fact that DRC is literally the richest country in the world. It's mineral resource, it's arable land, everything about the DRC. But there's a lot that as the East African community we can actually benefit. But then that benefit obviously cannot be realized when there's existing security threats, when we have rebel groups operating not only in the DRC, in Uganda, but also in Rwanda, and it can actually even spread to South Sudan and to the other countries. So, and I know for a fact that there is a peace and security arm at the Secretariat of the EAC, and they're very diligent with coming up with regional frameworks to strengthen security. And now that this is happening, I believe that it has their attention is now on that, and they are coming up with strategies and frameworks to actually to address the issue. But it obviously needs a lot of cooperation between the governments, but also between the people. Now that we can move in and out, it's like I walk into your compound, you walk into my compound. So what does that mean? The children in the compound then have the primary responsibility to actually see what exactly is happening, which then goes back to the trust between, So if that trust is cultivated, then it becomes easier for even at the regional level for integration to take place.
Thank you very much. And if I got what you are saying, especially from this first segment or the first question, is that messaging to the citizen is not just some superficial process. It takes more robust and protracted effort. But we shall be building onto that discussion, the second segment, where our ambassador here will, of course, give us an update on the security issue, but from the regional perspective. And we shall be continuing this discussion. And also, thank you very much to our dear viewers. Please stick with us. We're going to go for a brief break. And when we return, we shall continue with this very important discussion.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back to the second segment of the Youth Roundtable here, where we are discussing the core issue emanating from the attack that happened last week in Rwenzori area at Queen Elizabeth National Park, where we had two foreign nationals, South African and British, brutally shot and burnt in broad daylight, together, of course, with the son of the soil, the tour guide, also burnt. In this sad event, we therefore are here to reflect on what that means for the overall state of security. In the first segment, my very capable panelists brought out key issues, including, but not limited to, issues around how does the government relate with the citizenry. That is naturally supposed to be an alert system for the government. Do the citizens trust government enough to collaborate with them? In terms of messaging as well, does this trust then mean that people do not listen to government and vice versa? In this second segment, we shall be discussing it from a transcendent perspective, talking about how this affects integration of East Africa and among other core issues and wider issues. It's a great pleasure to have you, my dear panelists, once again, and we'll be proceeding with you, Your Excellence, Nshuti,
This time you got it
our
right.
dear ambassador. Congo, largely polarized for over 20 years, and now we keep seeing incidents largely linked still to that part of the East African region bloc. How do issues like the attack that we have, issues last week, but also the students, where the general opinion or the factual opinion is that these groups actually come from Congo. How does this security polarization of Congo affect the regional integration?
All right. So first of all, the EAC itself has a procedure that's taken before a country is admitted. So I want to believe that by the time we admitted the DRC, we knew we would be able to resolve most of the issues that would come up with admitting them as a country. So generally, I know at the regional level, there's talks about it, especially on the issue that has been with Rwanda and DRC. They are coming up with frameworks on how to solve this problem. But then also, the biggest part that's affected by the issue that DRC tends to have are usually closer to the borders that are with the other EAC countries. So I want to bring it back home. Our countries, like Uganda itself, how are we working towards that? How are we working towards solving our insecurity issue with DRC? Because if we can't integrate at the neighbor level, then we can't integrate with all the other countries that are in the EAC. Considering there's also other countries like Somalia that want to join. So I would want to say that the region has to take, if it's putting into the peace and security framework into action to solve these problems that DRC is having with Rwanda, now with Uganda as well. When they do put this framework into action, implement it and evaluate, and there's solutions that are coming on board and we are solving this issue, I would believe we would be able to use our experience with this onto solving other issues that would come up at a later time with the other countries. Yeah. So at the regional level, it does affect, though we, us at the local level, would be the ones that are facing the actual repercussions of the problems that we are facing with the insecurity problem. So still, even before we go to the regional level, as a country, we need to have come up with our own solution that we can then take to the further level to solve with all the other countries.
All right, thank you very much. And Comrade Lawel, the Congo problem, like she said, is normally at the borders. Uganda, Congo border, Rwanda, Congo border, and that buffer zone, Goma, is where we largely see conflicts. Do you think, of course, we have seen Kenya trying to come last year on a mission to kind of contain the problem. We also see President Tshisekedi, I don't know if that's the pronunciation, Tshisekedi, agreeing to work with our president to be able to quell this issue of ADF. Do you think we are now at a point where this is a shared problem, the Congo problem, and it must be dealt with as an East African problem rather than a Congolese problem where we say, those are Congolese?
It's quite a very complex issue to break down. Because do we share the problem? One could even argue that we share blame in the creation of the problem.
Exactly.
Because if you analyze how we get to have all these armed groups, but also, like you said, over 20 years, the role of Rwanda and Uganda in breaking down the system in Congo. You remember the changes of government from Mobutu to Laurent, and it's such that we have from the international courts over our role in the war in Congo and the things we perpetrated. So when we broke down the system in the eastern part of Congo, it's we're analyzing on what causes terrorism to come about and how these armed groups, the entire stretch from Goma, I think, up to border with West Nile, you have over 100 different armed groups. Wow. So the challenge may not even just be ADF, it's just that ADF is the immediate challenge to Uganda. But we have an entire polarized entity to deal with. So, like earlier analyzed, given the capacity of Congo, I think when we, like I said as well before, if we have this East African community, then we get the legitimacy or even a general goodwill to make sure that that region is pacified for us to be able to benefit from it. So it is my analysis that it is a problem we created. It is a problem whose now repercussions we are facing together. And I think it also presents an opportunity for us to solve it together and then benefit from
Maybe
it.
they'll forgive our fine.
And benefit from our region. Yeah, they may not forgive per se, but also it matters the terms of payment. They can be lenient, they can stretch it, you can pay in kind. So when you have a platform where you share a lot, it becomes easier for you to deal with those challenges. But also, if the Congo border is open, the eastern part is pacified, then you can trade, and from the benefits of that trade, you can still get pay for the damages you caused. Again, there's also, like she said, serious discussions, challenge between Rwanda and Congo. Some of them are really sentimental, ethnic. But I think the beauty with the East African platform is that even if they pretend, even if it's posturing, but at least they get to find a force or a platform where they can get to talk and do something about the challenge they are facing. I am one of those people who have learned to appreciate the role of the East African community. Because most people want to discuss it from up, political integration, to freely move. They get these challenges at the border, and then like, oh, this thing is not working. But I think that there are those marginal benefits that you get from the platform, which you wouldn't get if you didn't have the East African community.
Thank you very much.
Especially economic ones.
Yeah, thank you very much. And just to build on that, Comrade Joshua, he talks about, trade being one of the solutions. And this was also suggested in South Sudan, that if the Nuer and the Dinka could trade, like most of the problems would dissolve, because everyone understands the language of money. But we constructed a road in Congo a few years ago amidst serious protests on Uganda social media as to why government would be doing that, given the state. But that was, of course, a move to improve trade. And what's the role of trade in pacifying, Uganda, Kenya, the East African community?
Yeah, thank you very much. Now, I want us to first look at the existing countries in the region, even before we look at the new ones, those that are applying, those that are coming. We have the original three. And we have our sister state, Kenya, that always tells us we don't want Uganda milk, right? But we are saying we are enlarging the federation to get market. Do we have answers to the questions before? Have we answered the questions of why we cannot freely trade with Kenya, where it doesn't want our milk, where it cannot take our maize, where if Uganda needs maize, it has to first go to Zambia? And do we have those answers? I think we haven't. Then look at our immediate neighbor in the north. You remember that maize problem in around June, where you have to pack a trailer for a full month? Now, before we look at whether it is going to benefit us or like she says, home, are we ready? If we as Ugandans cannot have our commodities ready for export, and then we start creating problems between our sister countries, where they say we have certified our maize can go, and then it reaches there, and then Sudan says no, we cannot have this. So is it certified? Do we have a standard gauge? A standard
moment. Lawel, you had
There's
something
something
cheap.
small. I think that people who analyze the East African community must understand that before the community we are still individual countries, and sometimes there are overlapping interests. And so if you have like Kenya, which has a strong dairy industry, and you have maybe Lato subsidizing its cost, and it's causing tension within the traders within Kenya, and they're pressuring their government, sometimes there's a tendency for government to want to push back, because still we are countries first. But the thing with East Africa is that because there's that understanding, it becomes very difficult for government of Kenya or even Uganda to think of doing those things. But even when they do them painfully, it is easier for you to negotiate them to push back on their on those protectionist tendencies, because you have a platform. So every time you want to analyze, you need to ask yourself, what is the alternative? If we don't have the East African community, then how do you then engage them to tell them don't block our milk from coming? So the East African community gives you the legitimacy or even any ground of standing for you to say no, what you're doing is wrong, because we have this. If you don't have the East African community, then it's about every nation on its own. Let us
Actually, on that, when you look at the East African Treaty, the East African Community Treaty, there is a provision, a very important provision that actually allows for the countries to progress at alternating levels. Because I think usually people want to discuss the East African community when they have not read the legal instruments. They do not understand what the process has been. There is no comparative analysis from where we have come from, why the first EAC collapsed, how it was revived, and where we are now. Obviously, there are always going to be challenges, right? As he said, there are different, the different countries have different capacities. But also because they are still individual countries, sometimes the interests of Uganda will not necessarily be the interests of Kenya. And that's why it's important to then fall back to the treaty, which allows for the countries to move at that alternating level, such that if Rwanda and Kenya have agreed on a point, it's okay for them to continue as they wait for Tanzania and Uganda to catch up with them. You get? What that helps us is that if Uganda and Tanzania, say for example, are not moving because they are dubious, like they're doubting the success of it and all that, and then Rwanda and Kenya move forward with it, there are lessons for them to learn. There are things that they can draw on, which then pulls them up. Because you see, as I was saying, the processes that we have gone through, we started by establishing the Common Market Protocol, the Customs Union. Now we are at the point of political confederation. And the confederations allows the individual states to exist, right? The question of sovereignty comes in. But you see, even if we're in a regional bloc, we are still individual countries and we are still sovereign. What does sovereignty mean for us? It sometimes means that there are certain economic policies that we have to put in place that Uganda might not necessarily agree with. But you see, Uganda then as a landlocked country, for example, it definitely needs Kenya. It definitely needs Tanzania. How then does Uganda ensure that they not only protect their interests, but also balance them in a way that gives them negotiating power with Kenya? You get? And these are very complex things to deal with. But that is why we have all these frameworks that exist in order to ensure that there is a common table where we can discuss these things. We might not agree today, but tomorrow we shall agree. I think we should also cut them some slack.
Okay.
Yeah, it can't be
I'll let
100%
Joshua
progress.
proceed with his submission.
Okay, thank you. All that can be looked at. All that can be discussed. All that can be said. But I still believe if there must be a marriage between two parties, there must be some degree of agreement.
Yeah.
If we say that we want to make an integration that allows free trade, then it is okay for Kenya to develop. It is okay for Uganda to develop. It is okay for any country to develop. But there must be a minimum of when we say in Uganda we eat our meat boiled at 70%. And then Kenyans say, for us to eat meat, it is only boiled 30%. Now, Ugandans will not agree to that, no matter how. So there must be a standard gauge of we all meet this. Have we answered that question as East African community? That is what we need to look at. Now, the president said, okay, our HE says East Africa now stretches from the Indian Ocean to Atlantic Ocean. Perfect. And as a landlocked country, like she says, we need these sides, both. But then I want us to look at a Congo that almost 90% of its problems are all in a deserted area. And that area is just next to us. How disadvantageous is that to us? Now, that means that we are going to have to fly over a deserted area and go to Kinshasa to have business run. That is why I have no problem.
But even if there was no conflict, there's also no road.
And that's why I was coming. That's why I want to applaud our government and the HE for taking up that decision. I know very many of us weren't okay with it, considering the potholes we all go through in Kampala. But that connects us. Now we need that connectivity. Thank you very much. You have done that. Now it gets back to Congo as a nation. How effective is it? How are they ready to deal with the problem of the East, of the East Congo? What are their perspectives? Despite us having a converted effort to go there before, how are they ready to deal with it? You realize, apart from ADF, apart from M23, that Eastern Congo has over 20 rebel groups. Some of them are militia groups from Congo itself. Some of them are government agencies. They are mafiaism in Congo, because that is a very rich.
Basically stateless.
Yes, it's a very rich area. Stateless. Everyone. There is, I own this, you own this, the other one owns this. Now, M23 comes in, then Rwanda is not okay with that. ADF comes in, Uganda is not okay with that. Now, at the end of the day, how is Congo able to first resolve the other militias, make it part of its state, and then allow Kenya, Uganda, Sudan, Rwanda fight the emerging rebel groups? How is that able to happen? When that happens, hopefully, when that happens, and thanks to H.E. Kisekedi, because he has reached an agreement with the president to see how to smash this. But getting back to the integration, Uganda has over 600 porous borders. Now, the beauty of integration, this is where I put my ego aside and I say, okay, we need each other, is you realize if you have been privileged to go to some of these borders, you find this is a compound belonging to Joshua. this is a compound in Uganda, this is a compound in Congo belonging to Okot, and they are brothers. Same mother, same father. You're in Congo, I am in Uganda. Now, if you say you cut off this, that means you've cut off my family. When they cross the borders in Rwanda, most of the people that were suffering were not suffering because the borders are closed. They were suffering because they cannot access their gardens, they cannot access their farms. Now, if we say that let us integrate and we get a clear understanding of integration, and we say, okay, we are going to have our sovereignty, it is okay. We are going to have our political independence, it is okay. But at the end of the day, we merge as one. How then we remove these barriers where I can easily go to Congo and farm, fetch water, and come back home and sleep. Now that means I can get I do not have to go through any other formalities to get my produce from my garden to go to Kinshasa for as long as the road is there, for as long as there is peace. Now that really boosts economy, and then it brings a sense of brotherhood. It brings a sense of sisterhood. It brings a sense of responsibility that, okay, I must protect someone because I have something they need, or they have something I need. But if we are saying that, okay, because we have all these fights, we have all these, let us first, that is where I again say I put my ego aside. And I'm like, okay, I think we need integration.
Yeah, thank you very much, and for that submission. And of course, I think the same business class of people are the ones that will collectively call out the different countries when issues happen. I'd like to move to you, Mercy. You spoke about governance at a regional level. I'm sorry, at a national level, but she also spoke of certain protocols that we need. That you need to fulfill before joining the East African community. I need to visit those protocols because some of the countries that have joined,
I will not try the protocol.
Yeah. So, how can we? But that doesn't matter. How can we? Is there a collective governance framework that the EAC ensures that countries are moving in terms of state building, constitutionalism,
and maybe Mr. Okot, before she comes
rule of
in,
law?
I chip in just one second. That as also we talk about the integration, we need to look at what we are talking about, the suspicions of, because some of us have had the suspicion of, okay, so, there is a country joining, but it is a handful of someone. There is a country joining, not because it is joining the group, but because someone is widening their scope. So if we can also again look
it goes back to the question, because part of state building is building institutions. For example, if you wanted to make an agreement with Kenya right now, you wouldn't really mind about that because they change presidents. Or Tanzania changes president. So back to the question, like, does the East African community provide a platform for calling out nations, to be able to move faster or fast track issues around state building, constitutionalism, and rule of law? Because I feel like that's one of the things that could actually hold the integration process, but also security.
Okay, so first of all, I want to say that there are certain things that I don't have permission to talk about. So I can't because at the EAC, the structure, some of those issues like who decides who to come in, that is at summit level. So it's strictly decided by heads of state. Clearly, I'm not even a head of a family yet. Anyway, that's besides the point.
Yeah.
So, what is it? Okay.
No, we want to say the family is the biggest.
Yeah. So, the EAC under the Secretariat, it has a political affairs department, and this political affairs department generally is the one that is in charge of fast tracking the process of the integration. but also in terms of coming up with frameworks to fast track most of these governance issues in terms of rule of law, constitutionalism, and all that. I mean, we have seen, and the DRC is having elections very soon.
December.
Yes, in December, and we have had other countries have elections. I think in 2020, at the time when I was still a serving youth ambassador, I was privileged to be part of the election observance mission in the United Republic of Tanzania. That is one of the initiatives that the EAC has in place that you see. In fast-tracking constitutionalism and the rule of law, obviously electoral processes are very important. And there are structures that they have put in place, obviously with their development partners, to ensure that they not only observe the democratic process, but also have a say in it. That you come up with a position as the East African community on some of the things that actually happen. But again, as I was discussing before, obviously there are challenges, right? Especially in regards to the whole sovereignty question. That, you know, you could ask yourself that how at the regional level, coming back, can the EAC, for example, come and tell a president of a country that you cannot stay in power for more than 50 years? You know, it might not necessarily be very possible in that regard. However, there can be frameworks, a joint framework, where we have performance indicators in terms of democracy, in terms of involvement of civil society in the democratic systems, in terms of youth inclusion in development. As you know that she's the current sitting Deputy Youth Ambassador for Uganda. That is a creation of the Political Affairs Department, that they now have an East African Community Youth Ambassadors platform, which draws youth from all the member states so that they can actively participate in the integration process, but also in the development of some of these frameworks. I think in 2019, we were having consultative dialogues on the EAC Youth Bill, you know, which is a governance policy for the youth in the region, but also how then we can position youth to into governance positions in the regional framework at large. Yeah, so there are frameworks that are in place. Implementation is being done. Some challenges, obviously, just like every other institution will have, but we are making strides, right?
Do you think we'll reach a level where the EAC can call out a president?
So now, actually, 2 weeks ago, Princess and I were in Arusha, and we were having an EAC Youth Fellowship. So we've had a visit to the Secretariat, the headquarters, and we had a conversation with one of the staff members at the East African Court of Justice. And it's amazing, they actually have a system where the court has jurisdiction over matters like that, where you can have, say for example, the president of Uganda calling out the president of Kenya, and it can be, you know, like litigated in court at the East African Court of Justice, and a decision is also made. In fact, there is also a framework where citizens, common members of the East African region, can bring a matter to the court. There's actually a case. Yes, and sue the government. There is a case where no. Well, of course there is Malema Birizi, but there is a case where a Rwandan lady took the government of Rwanda to court because her brother had been abducted and she hadn't seen him for quite a while. And the court made a pronouncement on it, said that what the government had done was wrong, and they needed to obviously deliver that. Yes. So there are structures in place. It can be possible. In fact, if we decide that Uganda is not doing well in terms of security, if we get annoyed enough, we can hold our government accountable. Obviously, challenges might be there in implementation, but there are strides.
Lawel, so many comments.
He's been triggered.
I think he wants to.
He's triggered.
No, it's an interesting discussion, especially now that I think the EAC is just jump starting. With the European Union, we see obviously more strict because of maybe the power of the bloc. I remember when they were admitting, was it Hungary? And there were all these issues, and normally when they default, you see the power.
Yeah.
And perhaps that's somewhere we'll go as time goes along. But I wanted to, as a youth ambassador, what's the role of the youth within this whole issue that we are discussing, integration and security?
Yeah, so I believe one of the key things we have to do as youth is amplify our voices. Like, for example, through this discussion, we've established what the problems are, what we think should be done, what we think is not being done right. And I think that's something key, even for those that are not able to be here themselves, that we are able to represent some of their views that bigger people may understand, that this is what we think as young people in Uganda. This is what we think the EAC should be doing. This is what we think you're not doing great. So also with having the Court of Justice, we could probably get annoyed enough and sue our governments where we think they should be sued. But yeah, most importantly, I believe as youth, we should get involved in the governance process. Most young people don't believe it's their business. It's like, yeah, people are dying, we're sorry to hear that, but what can we do about it? We don't think there's an avenue for us to play a role in it. Like, also there's like the issue of insecurity because of the abductions that keep taking place over young people that get involved into political areas. So most of the times it's like, we are worried, what if I get that involved and then I'm abducted? What does my family can't do anything about it? They're probably not well enough to go to the court and argue out that I need to be released, or they don't even know where I am. So most of the times I believe young people believe it's none of their business. The government should play their role. It should be doing most of these things that we are probably fighting to advocate for. But then again, if us as young people are not thirsty enough to hold the people responsible accountable for these things, then nothing will be done. We have to have the strength to hold the institutions responsible for these things accountable, to ask them to do the things that they are meant to do, with like the social conduct here talked about. I think we need, like as young people, we need to get annoyed enough to like push for it to come back, to push for the government to do what it said it's supposed to be doing. Yeah.
And how far with the East African Youth Bill? Is it something that is still
it's still being in place. So.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yes, Lawel, your time has come. But also, I think our time is, so we will also discuss in this round particular steps that can be taken, stemming from, of course, the issue that the security incident that happened, but also at a wider level, the discussion that we have been having.
Yeah. So I want to understand the East African community as like a marriage of convenience. That there are things that we can work on, especially the economic interests, because like you said, the idea of we all need the money, we need all the cash inflow and outflow, and I think that is something, regardless of whether you have democracy or not, all of us are willing to agree. And I think that if you analyze the East African Community project to the extent of fulfilling economic interests, I think it is a very perfect platform. There could also be challenges like security, and every country cares about its security. And so we'll agree on. The one thing I'm willing to disagree about is on whether, on it being a political project and analyzing it in capacity to have political harmony, but also like things like calling out governance challenges, things like human rights, things like...
You don't think it will reach that?
I don't think... One, I think it stems from its formation, that we come into this arrangement already as flawed, nascent democracies, and that it is virtually...
Which is different from the first formation.
I want to analyze it as is now.
As is, okay.
That we come already as broken democracies, as human rights abusers, and that it's virtually impossible for the East African community structure to hold governments individual governments accountable for those flaws. But also even the structure, the fact that the heads of states literally have all the power, decision-making power. And if you want to know that, if you talk to individual EALA members of parliament, you sense that energy of, there's little we can do. We don't have power. Even if we legislate this, it has to be assented to by the heads of states. And so if the person who has the real power to hold another accountable, even to make decisions, is the perpetrator, is the abuser of democracy and human rights and those things, like Museveni is, and maybe, I don't know about the other countries, then how is it possible? Like, what other organ has capacity to hold, for example, Museveni and the government accountable?
Well, what about the argument that it's a work in progress? That perhaps at some point in 2040,
Progressive
That-
realization.
even if that is the issue, I don't think that it is the East African community with power to do that. It is within the internal structures of those individual countries that up until the citizens of Uganda have capacity to hold government accountable, maybe through generating capacity, or that by God's grace, the people we have now go away and we get more progressive leaders, then that is when, at a larger level, it means that every country is producing a head of state who is progressive and respects human rights. But the current condition, the structure of the East African community, does not have capacity, especially to deal with governance, democracy, human rights challenges.
all right,
But
thank you.
it's good if you look at it from the economic sense.
Perspective.
Yeah. And we hope also the economy grows enough to, sometimes when the bloc has enough power, it can actually improve governance as well, as we see in Europe.
When citizens are empowered economically, then they can push
Yes.
for their rights.
Yeah. Also, a way, where do we go from here, having had this incident in the game park?
Okay, like I
As a
said,
country.
yeah, like I said, one, that government is not transparent, because like we talked about, there is a breakdown on the relationship between citizens and their government. We talked about the idea of abductions. You don't know who is ADF, who is a government operative. And so it becomes really, really difficult. But I think, like she talked about, we can continue to have these conversations. I like, there are people they call idealists who talk about the greater picture. And I like them because they give us a benchmark of where we want to go. They keep reminding us that this is where we need to be. Because unless you have that voice, then you will be stagnant. So as we can continue to say government should respect its part of the bargain on the social contract, respect people's rights. And then people will, I think, cooperate. Of course, we sympathize with those who lose their dear ones. But anyway, we can. I'm a very optimistic person. I hope that one day, as young people, like she said, we still have a blank check to build the country we want. So hopefully, when we engage in the politics and leadership, we can become the leaders who will provide the sense of security to our citizens.
Thank you very much, Lawel. And Comrade Joshua, where do we go from here, having had this situation?
You see, the challenge with a broken state is that everyone will criticize you and they will be correct. That's a problem. The moment you have an F in a paper, everyone will say you're dull and you can never ever refute it. But now, where do we go? I want to still believe that Ugandan government is capable. I want to still credit our security forces. I want to still credit the citizenry. I believe we can do better. We have done better before and we can still do better. We have had alerts from outside countries about such threats. Now, with the integration of East Africa, if we have a Kenya, a Rwanda, a Sudan somewhere that is looking out for any threats everywhere, and where we sleep off, then Kenya can say, hey, wake up. There is this. I think it is something that we can build on and have something better for ourselves. But again, the common talk of the youth in this, the youth in that, the youth in this, And then after we get drilled into, you see, the moment we lose ideology, like he says, the moment you lose ideology, you do not know where you're headed. The only thing you want to look at is the negative.
So you think we are running without an ideology?
No, this is I'm coming. The only thing we look at is the negative. Someone has done this, someone has done that, someone has done this, someone has done that. That is where the question the princess brings in. What are we able to do? Before we look at who has failed and who is not working, what are we able to do? Before we look at who has not done whatever they have done, what have we done? What is our contribution? Can we stand as youths? Can we stand as young people? Can we stand as a generation and say, okay, we have lost who we have lost. That is enough. Can we do something different? Let me ask you a simple question. If they came recruiting for the ESC Greater Army and they say, we need capable people to join here, and we all say, okay, no, I'm not taking that route. I'm not taking that route. I'm not taking that route. For as long as we say I'm not taking that route, we are creating a gap. I'm not saying we're all of us going to be in one circle, but for as long as we keep, no, I'm not taking this route, you're creating a gap. So he says, I'm not taking this route, he's creating a gap. I'm not taking this route, he's creating a gap. We have youths right now who's like you've had the discussion here. Okay, even when I have something to say, what if I say it and then I do not leave the gate? You're creating a gap. Now, where do we go? Can we amplify our voices? Can we stop this blame game and find solutions? Even when those we are trying to find solutions for seem not to want to have the solutions. Can we have the solution? Because they also found the solutions even when they were fought against. Can we fight and find solutions for our nation? Can we fight and find solutions for our generation? But for as long as we are saying, I'm not taking this route, there is a gap created. I'm not doing this, I am not joining this group, there is a gap created. So I honestly call out for our generation to reduce on the blame game and focus more on finding the problem. After finding the problem, then do not throw it away. Let us go ahead and find a solution.
All right. Thank you very much, Comrade Joshua. As a great man once said, injustice is not perpetrated by those who fight for it, but those who stand by and watch. So omission is actually one of the biggest actions that we can do as young people. And hopefully this show helps to cover some of those gaps that you speak of. And over to you, Mercy. Where do we go from here? But also, I wanted you to speak on how can we, reignite confidence from the international community after this incident, that Uganda is still a safe place where you can tour, you can visit, you can invest.
So I highly agree with what Comrade Joshua has just been talking about, the fact that we need to reduce on the blame game and do something. And part of that is realizing that now, as the East African community, we are now one. We shouldn't be looking at it in terms of your Kenyans, your Congolese, your Ugandans. We need to now have a sense of brotherhood, that we say we call ourselves East Africans and not South Sudanese, not Ugandans. What that also means then is recognizing that once Uganda is having a challenge, that challenge can very easily reach Kenya, can very easily spread to Tanzania and to Rwanda and all the other East African states. And so we need to have collective action in recognizing that if one country faces a challenge, it is an East African challenge. If Congo is having challenges, it is no longer just Congo because it is now part of us. So all of us are facing this challenge and we all need collective action in coming up with solutions for that. And as the features of today and tomorrow, the youth are very instrumental in doing that. And you see, as I like to say, that everything is very political. So when I hear my friends or people say that, For me, I'm not interested in politics. I can't do that. It's a dirty game. I can't do that. I find that very discouraging because once we know that everything is political, then we then have a starting point to actually engage in the governance issue of our country. That is when we start to actually realize that we can hold people accountable. We start to look for avenues where we can speak and amplify our voices. Well, because you see, for example, you realize that even as youth, we can come up with a policy paper. There are actually structures in place where we can even present a position at the parliament and all that, but most people are not doing that. Why? Because they don't know that it's there. So we need to, first of all, acquaint ourselves with existing things, as Joshua said at first, that we need to know what is happening. After knowing what is happening, we need to know where to get help from. We need to know who to hold accountable, as Princess said. And once we do that, we shouldn't also just come up with ideas and then move on. The way Ugandans on Twitter be. You've quarrel about something today, and then in the evening, it's a new issue. It's a new issue. So I don't know why we do that, why we get angry for just a few hours and let go. And move on. Some can say it's a coping mechanism, but then
Twitter is like a punching bag.
It says something very. I think it's a portrayal of a very big flaw in us as Uganda as a whole and as the youth. We shouldn't be giving up, right? And for me, I'm very into Pan-Africanism. I think we should go back and look at how our forefathers did their things. When you look at the story of Kwame Nkrumah, Julius Nyerere, they never gave up. If President Museveni had given up, would he be in power right now? Obviously not. So I think we need to draw from those lessons, obviously pick the good lessons and carry them forward. Let us have a revolutionary spirit in us as youth. But then the incident that happened and how we can just build more trust, in terms of the international community, but also in boosting our standing on the global sphere. I think that as Ugandans, as government, we need to cultivate trust, not only with our people, but also in the international community. Investigate the incident. Let people actually know what it is. You see, most times people think that when you tell the truth, then you're holding yourself bare. But that thing is, people will find the truth whether you hide it or not. It will always, come out. So it's better when you're more upfront with people. They respect you for it, even when it's a hard decision. But then also let them see that you're doing something about it. It's not just about coming up and saying that the ADF did this and then you sit down because you feel like you've shifted the blame. No. Own up your mistakes. Own up certain things that might have been done, but that make you look bad, and then have systems in place to address those challenges, but to also mitigate any further occurrences.
Yes. Thank you very much. Yes, and finally, we do have, let's have a word from you, HD, on a way forward, especially calling on the youth to take particular action so that we can reach the ideals that we would love.
Yeah, so earlier you said how they would be detonating a bomb in town, and in the evening Ugandans are out partying. But I think it's also like a coping mechanism. They're living each day as it comes, because it's like we don't know what tomorrow looks like. And most of us are also like we can't do anything about it. So we're just going to live every day the way it comes. If I've survived today, I celebrate that I've survived the day. But then I don't think that's how we should be living. We should be getting more involved. I would say we are very privileged to be on this, because there's like a number of people that don't even know where to start from on this conversation. They don't even know where is it taking me. Like, I don't see the point of having such a discussion. But then us bringing it on table is like someone will be scrolling through YouTube and then they'll look at it and they're like, what are these people talking about? So I feel like we should use our platforms that we have. She talked about Twitter. Twitter has like all the information you need. You wake up, it's like a newspaper. You wake up in the morning and you'll know what's happening in Uganda at the moment through Twitter. But then because of how people just keep changing topic from this to the next thing, instead of concentrating on that one thing till there's something done about it. So I feel like we should be able to use our social media platforms, because I think they're the most easily accessible platforms for most of us, especially those that can have access to the internet. So yeah, we should be able to participate at the whatever level we can participate as young people. We all have different capabilities. There are those who would be really good with debates, so they should be involved in things like that, have discussions about this so that they can be involved in the crucial governance process for our countries. But most importantly, that it starts with you as a person. You're not going to look at the EAC to solve a problem that's from home. So we need to start from where we are to before we solve EAC problems, we need to start with ourselves. Solve our problems, then we can be able to help the other countries within the community to solve the problems they have. Yes.
Yes, thank you very much, Princess, for being with us today. And of course, all of you for joining us today. And to our dear viewers, thank you very much for keeping track of the discussion. Of course, today we were talking about the security question that stems from the attack that happened last week in Rwenzori. And of course, the wider recurrent issues that have been happening in that area, the Congo question, but also regional integration. As you probably noticed, a complex discussion, and we are still progressively realizing a lot of the ambitions that we have as an East African community. We hope that through discussion we start something. Please make sure that you share this as far and wide as possible. We are coming to the close of the show, but before that, I just want to take a second to eulogize the passing of Honorable Henry Chamber, who was an ardent statesman throughout our independence years, worked with several presidents, author of very good books as well, politically. And I think it's imperative that we recognize some of the statesmen, also a former minister of health, some of the statesmen that served our country with a lot of hard work and diligence. May his soul rest in peace. Yeah. Otherwise, till next time, Youth Roundtable, always here on Civic Space TV, with me, your host, Okot Olaa.